This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com.
In a minute. But welcome to this month's episode of your monthly journey into the unknown, into where we're going, why we're going, and what happens on the other side. Welcome to Through the Looking Glass. I am your co-host, Scott Criscuolo. It has been a great 11-month journey thus far, and tonight, this week, or whenever you're listening, this is episode 12. Why? Because we have reached almost a year. It'll technically be the 1-year anniversary next month in October, and we'll try to come up with a fun topic. But what I didn't want to say was, I'm surprised we've gotten this far, because I'll be honest, I know most of us here at the PTB Wrestling Network and any other, podcast feed likes to always say, "Oh my God, I can't believe we made a year." I got to be honest, I'm dead serious on my dad's spirit. I knew we'd make it this far. I knew it. Why? Because number one, it's a great show. It's an amazing concept, and we thank you for all of your support, your downloads, your comments. But also because the guy that I do the show with every month is amazingly dedicated. He's a great guy. That goes without saying, as all of you in the PTB world know. But this was his baby. He brought me along, and we have had a blast every single month. Having said that, tonight's topic is a little depressing. That's right. So we hope to not bring it down. Let me bring in my man, the Thunder from Down Under. Hello, Dave Hall. How are you?
I'm doing well, Scott. Hi to you. Hi to all of our listeners, and I just want to thank everyone for giving us a chance and for joining us on this journey. And we do hope that you have enjoyed it so far, and we look forward to bringing you many more episodes on this journey. It's fun. I really enjoy being able to do this, and I'm really glad that you've come along for the ride, Scott. So I'm excited. 1 year, 12th episode. We're, like I said, just about at our 1 year anniversary next month, but it's been a great journey so far.
It really has. And just think, episode 1 was CM Punk, and now everybody hates him. No, maybe not everybody. I guess maybe it depends not everyone, on what side you stand on. But
I know it's been an interesting month. I found that interesting that 12 months ago we were talking about CM Punk's return. Right. And at the end of 12 months of our show, CM Punk may be gone. Who knows? I guess we'll have to wait and see where things go with it. That's just been a cluster and a half.
I know. Yeah. What a mess. But we'll save that topic for other podcasts. We like to have fun here. We like to go. And in the alternate universe, I don't know, Dave, maybe in 2 years when we do like episode 30 something, we'll do in an alternate universe, what happens when CM Punk, the Bucks, and Kenny Omega get along? And Tony Khan is not insane. And, it's like all that kind of stuff. Anyway, so it's obviously it's good to talk to you. How are things down in – this is like I have to say, Dave, the next like 2 or 3 months for us in terms of weather, because as everyone knows, one of the first things we like to do is make fun of each other's weather, depending on the time of year. As everyone knows, where Dave is the complete 180 of where most of the rest of us are on this side of the hemisphere. That was the running joke back in January when he said it was 99 degrees and I had it at 9 degrees. Then, of course, later in the year we flip-flop. But these next 3 months, I would say, Dave, this month, October and November, are kind of the 3 months where our weather probably like levels out a little bit. You know what I mean? So, for instance, what was
the next two? Today is we're building to about 22 Celsius today. 22, 23 Celsius. So
I gotta goggle that because I don't even know what the hell that means.
let's see who can Google it first.
Yeah, let's see.
71 and a half Fahrenheit.
You know what? That's about what we were today. I would say here in Connecticut, it bounced back and forth somewhere between like 73 and 77, 78. I got over 80 a couple times, a little bit today. It might have topped out at perhaps 80 or 81. So So yeah, it might have been a little warmer here, but this was kind of an anomaly, I think, for here as September goes on and we get into October here in the Northeast and in this side of the world, we're probably going to start to dip down, whereas you will start to tick up. I bet you when you and I talk next month for our 1-year anniversary, that will probably be a little more even. You may actually be a little higher than me. And then by November, you'll be probably in the 70s and I'll be probably in the 40s. So, and then December, I don't even want to get in. And then December, I don't even want to get into it. So, anyway, again, I just want to say these first 11 episodes, we've had so much fun. We've gone up and down the dial. You've come up with some awesome topics for us. We've bounced around a bunch of different themes and eras and time frames. We've done the 80s. We've done the new generation era. We've done the attitude era. We've done ruthless aggression. We've done current. We did the 2010s. I mean, you've done a fantastic job of bouncing us around. So I don't think, to be honest, Dave, I don't think we've done the same time frame in back-to-back episodes.
Close. The Bret Hart the Bret Hart screw job episode was followed by the Goldberg episode. They're only a couple of years apart, but outside of that, we've really tried to I've really tried to bounce it around a bit, because I don't want our listeners to get this sense that they only talk about the Attitude Era or they only talk about the classic era. I want our listeners to get a variety. Because it keeps it interesting, but it also that caters to everyone, because not everyone is as old as you and I, Scott. There are a lot of younger people out there who didn't grow up in the same eras that we did, and so they want to hear things that they look fondly back on, but was actually when they were alive. So I like to keep things moving around a little bit because of that.
Yeah, no, and we thank everyone again for your support and your downloads. It's been a lot of fun. We bounced around. People loved Dave, I've gotten a lot of talk from people in our PTB and some other listeners. We've gotten a lot of chatter about the Ultimate Warrior episode. The one we did where we kind of rebooked his world title run in 90 into 91. We got a lot of talk on that. I feel like, Dave, that a lot of fans right now are very interested in, kind of the old generation, what they call the original pay-per-view realm, the Hogan era. I think that, what if we rebooked Hogan as a jobber? No, I'm just kidding. No. What if he stayed in the band Coco? That would actually be a pretty interesting one. What if Hogan never went into wrestling and stayed in music? That's an interesting topic. Somebody told me that one. Like, what would you guys do if Hogan was erased from the Federation era? Well, the answer would be,
I guess,
there'd be no WWF.
Well, I guess that could be an interesting one for down the track. What if it wasn't Hogan? Who would Vince have tried to strap the rocket to, and who would have he used to go national? Would it have even been possible? Oh no, that's something for another time.
Yeah, no, that I mean, because obviously without Hogan, the WWF had never been at national prominence, so that's obviously a big thing. But anyway, please keep giving us your ideas. We'll bang them out, talk about them. We'd love to hear what you think would be a great journey through the Looking Glass. Why don't we hop into tonight's topic? Because, like I said, we're very jubilant and excited on this episode number 12. However, the topic is a little morose. And maybe not really. I mean, maybe it's more like maybe this is a topic, Dave, where I think more people would rather be in the Looking Glass rather than on this side of the Looking Glass.
Yeah.
Why don't you set us up? What do we got tonight?
This is one that I've actually had a few people reach out to me and suggest in various forms or another. And I guess as wrestling fans, we do, as we've said before, we all like to think of the what ifs. What if, as I said, what if Hogan hadn't been around? Who would the WWF have launched the rocket to? As we've looked at before, what if the screw job didn't happen? We like the what ifs. We like to think as wrestling fans. We like to put our little booker hats on and go, what might have happened in these situations? But there are, throughout the years, there's been people that we're fans of who've been in quite prominent positions, and through through circumstance, whether it be whether it be accidents, tragedy. We've had some of our favourite stars throughout the years have been forced into a position where we're no longer able to watch them compete. Their careers have been ended in the blink of an eye. Some of them have been ended through such serious injury that they're unable to compete again. And sadly, others have had their careers ended because of an untimely passing away. And that has a big impact on a fan, because you lose the person you're supporting. You lose a little piece of yourself because you can't back them anymore. They're gone. They're not in the ring anymore. And so today we're just gonna have a little bit of a look at what might have happened in some of our favorite wrestlers' careers if they hadn't suddenly had their career ended, in whether it be through injury or through an early death. And I think we're going to have some fun. It's a morbid topic, like you said, to think about guys that have been hurt so significantly they can't wrestle anymore, or have passed away early. But at the same time, I think there's an element where to think about what their careers could have done if they were still around, if they'd had the opportunity to continue their career. I think it's going to be a fun journey, an interesting concept. So we've got five guys. Yep. Five names that we have put together whose careers were ended early, and we've limited. I mean, obviously there are so many guys out there that have suffered those career-ending injuries or had their career ended through an early death, and we could do so many of them. But we decided, Scott and I, in preparing for this, decided we wanted to look at guys that were at the upper end of their career, in very prominent positions when their career ended, so that we can, these are guys that probably had a bigger upside where things were going. And so we're going to look at five guys. Some of them you're probably listening to already thinking, oh, they're going to talk about this person, and we may very well. I think some of these are going to be very, very clear and obvious, but I'm hoping it's going to be an interesting journey for everyone. I guess before we go, Scott, I want to ask you, guys that have been injured, guys that have passed away. What was the first one? Who's the first person that you had a bit of a liking to, or you at least had a keen interest in what was happening in their career, that something changed? Who was the first wrestler from your perspective where that happened?
Well, not to tip our hands, Dave, but probably the first one is the first guy we're going to talk about tonight. I'll say his name, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of it later. But clearly the first one we're going to talk about tonight is Magnum TA. Because I was watching Crockett in 85, 86. And when 1986 started, he was the United States heavyweight champion. He wrestled clearly one of my three favorite matches of all time. And that is, of course, the I Quit steel cage match at Starrcade 85 against Tully Blanchard. Starrcade 85, as most people know, is probably one of my favorite pay-per-views of all time. And it was evident as we were getting into 1986 that he was going to go to Starrcade that year and beat Ric Flair and become the world heavyweight champion. And when the car accident happened, and we'll get more into these details in a few minutes, I was devastated because now, and I've said this on past shows too, Dave, I was a heels fan in Crockett. I was a babyface fan in the WWF, but in Crockett, I was a heels guy. I loved the Horsemen. I loved all the bad guys. I liked Dusty Rhodes, but I usually rooted for him to get the crap kicked out of him because it was good storytelling. But Magnum TA was a guy that I always kind of latched onto. His promo skills were not the best, and when we go through the looking glass with him, we'll explain how that might have hindered him down the line. But I was expecting a killer Starrcade 86 main event with Flair for the World's Heavyweight Championship. So that one kind of knocked me for a loop. The first WWF guy, you know what it is, Dave? Even though he had left the WWF, when I read in PWI that Adrian Adonis died.
Yeah.
He had left the WWF in probably late 87. And then I think it was sometime in 88, he had gotten into a van crash.
July 88.
July 88, a van crash up in Canada, Nova Scotia or something, with a couple of other wrestlers, and he passed away. That kind of hit me, and I'm like, oh, wrestlers die? Like, I only thought they died of old age when they retired, like the rest of regular people. Like, I thought, like I remember guys passing away in their, in the 80s, but these were guys, Gorgeous George and, guys like even Lou Thez lived into the 2000s. Like, I'm talking old guys like John Tolos was alive because he was coach. But those kind of guys, but even those guys were very rare because they were still alive. The guys who died in the 80s were usually guys that were wrestling in the 30s, in the 40s that we never even saw. It wasn't even until like the late 90s, early 2000s that the older guys, the guys that wrestled in the 50s and 60s, like the Gene Kiniskis, the Lou Theszes, Buddy Rogers, the guys like that started dying. They didn't start passing away until the late 90s.
Yeah.
So really the two that hit me as a kid were in terms of injury, Magnum TA, and again we'll elaborate on him in a little bit, and Adrian Adonis, because I saw that story in PWI and went, holy crap, like he was only in his, I don't know, early 30s, I think. So
yeah.
So that kind of hit me. So those are probably the two for me as a kid. What about you?
Yeah, look, I as I've shared before, due to the way wrestling, what we had access to down here in Australia, I didn't know of Magnum when I first broke into wrestling, and so when I first became, as I've shared before, sort of 1988 was when I started to get exposed to the world of PWI and the wrestling magazines and get that. So Magnum had already had his injury, and same with David Von Erich. They'd sort of gone. Adrian Adonis to be the first one that I remember, but probably more prominent in the magazines was Bruiser Brody. I remember the PWI magazines and all the sister publications were absolutely saturated with the whole story around Bruiser Brody's death, murder, killing, however you want to, whatever you take on it down in the Caribbean. But Bruiser Brody's was that was the first one that I remember reading about. But again, because I wasn't, I'd never been exposed to him as a wrestler. I'd read about him in a couple of the magazines, and that was probably the first time I'd ever really seen anything significant on him was his death. So I read a lot at that point about who he was, and Adrian Adonis was only a couple of weeks earlier. So that was my first exposure to it. The first guys that probably passed away that I had investment in are guys like Andre the Giant and Kerry Von Erich.
Yeah.
Which would have been around about 94, 93, 94. When did Andre... Andre was around about 92, 93, wasn't he?
93, January. He died. You know how I remember this, Dave? Andre died in January of 93 because it was one of the first 10 bell salutes on one of the first episodes of Raw. And I was at my friend's house in Rhode Island, not Justin, I hadn't met him yet. Another friend of mine who was going to Providence College, and it was the morning of the first Cowboys Bills Super Bowl. It was the morning of Super Bowl 27. And I remember waking up that morning and putting on Sports Center and seeing Andre the Giant had died.
Wow.
I do remember that. So it was January of 93 he passed away, because I remember two things. It was the morning of the first Bills-Cowboys Super Bowl, and that Monday on Raw, it was like the, I don't know, third ever episode. They did the I'm pretty sure they did the 10 bell salute. So
and again, Andre's career had already wound down by that point due to his ongoing issues with his back and his knees and all that. So, but that was the first one that really struck me as a fan. That I went, oh my goodness, that is a shame. And Kerry Von Erich's passing, his suicide. Again, his career. Because of some of the life choices he'd made, his career had pretty well come to an end as well. But he was younger. He was certainly someone who you would think could have made a comeback or could have been back in the ring or involved in some way at some point. So those were the first ones that really were on my radar in a prominent way. Really brought some sort of impact into my life. So. Yeah, so that's and it does hurt. I guess it like I said before, these things hurt us because we do invest in them as fans. We sit there, we cheer them on, we get invested in the storylines. We come to love the characters that they play, and maybe not so much the character they play on screen, but who they are off screen. Andre the Giant has, I think who he was on screen, was everyone could see, but the stories of who he was behind the scenes, the generous man that he was, generous to his friends and all that. You hear those stories, and it really brings a longing that you wish you might have even got to know him at some point because of that. So these things they impact us because we lose something that we're invested in, and there are some fans. There are some people out there that has a bigger impact than others. I mean, I'm not one to. I'm not a big crier. When sports people and actors and stuff pass away, but there are fans out there that it does have that impact on, that it brings them. It brings them down. It brings them into a significant mourning. And I mean, there are several. There's a couple of guys that we're going to talk about tonight that sort of thing did happen because of how loved they were by fans.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I just want to preface before we go any further. Clearly, Scott and I, we're going to put out there is one who will not be named, and we are not wanting to even go there with this episode.
Nope.
It's you all know who we're talking about. We're not going there. That's off limits. But yeah, like I said, we've got 5 guys that we're going to look at today who, through injury or death, left us at probably the prime of their careers. And the first one, as Scott mentioned, is Magnum TA. We're going all the way back, 1986, and Scott, you've already alluded to it. Magnum TA in October '86 was involved in a pretty serious car accident, and he was destined and primed. That they'd already got the wheels in motion. He was supposed to be facing Ric Flair at Starrcade that year, and I guess he was. The belief, the talk, and Ric Flair's even talked about it, that Magnum TA was destined to win that main event in Starrcade '86. So that's where we're going. We're going to go first. Look, as I said, I've come to know Magnum after his career ended. I've seen matches and all that, but I always knew when I saw him, these matches that I've seen, that his career ended in '86. For someone who at least got to ride the wave of Magnum for a little bit, like you said, Scott, what was it about Magnum? What was the appeal of Magnum TA to a wrestling fan?
Well, I mean, he was an amazing babyface. He was good looking. The reason they called him TA, they really called him Magnum TA, was because, his real name was Terry Allen. That was his initials. I remember seeing him, the first time I saw him was Crockett, but he obviously cut his teeth in Mid-South. I started watching all that on the network, and he was crazy over then. He was the North American heavyweight champion, and he went to Crockett at the end of '84 and was immediately over with everybody. And he immediately won the U.S. title. Yeah, the U.S. title. He beat, was it?
Wahoo.
Oh, it was Wahoo. That's right. Wahoo was a heel. That's right. Wahoo was a weird heel. And then he lost to Tully Blanchard with Baby Doll dressed as the cop, which I always thought was awesome. And then, of course, that led to what I mentioned earlier, an epic I Quit steel cage match at Starrcade 85, which was to this day, and I'm telling you, Dave, you've seen it. I know you've definitely seen it.
Yeah, I've seen that match. That's a fantastic.
It's a
bloody brawl.
Yeah, I mean that scene. I mean that end with Magnum just getting the piece of wood in Tully's eye and the blood just gush. It's amazing. What storytelling? And then he started feuding with Nikita, and then he got stripped by Bob Geigel. He was set because he was with Dusty. They were the whole U.S. Express or whatever, the whole Real Americans or whatever they were called. For a fact that Magnum was in line to Starrcade 86 and beat Flair to become the world's heavyweight champion. There was no doubt about it. Again, I liked the heels, but I was pumped for Magnum. I thought it was somebody different. It was a change of pace. And on top of the fact that Starrcade 86 is kind of a very low flow, good, sneaky good card. I think that was going to be a killer main event. And Magnum, to his credit, Dave, if you watch all of his TV matches, they're literally 30 seconds. He does the belly-to-belly suplex, and you're done. So they were protecting the fact that he might not have been a Ricky Steamboat. He was not exactly a technical whiz-bang, but he got the crowd going. The girls loved him. He was immensely good-looking. He had that, buff, good physique, hairy chest. I mean, he was like a typical 80s guy for the ladies. So I was into it because it was going to lead to a great match at Starrcade, and was just a different babyface to kind of lead Crockett into the next chapter of the 80s. So I was into him. I was excited.
I think that's part of the key of what you said. He was different. He wasn't Dusty, and right. and they were and it would yeah. The belief is it would take them in a new direction in the back end of the 80s. Flair would have made him look $1 million. Would have made him look so good in the ring as Flair does, and we saw that with Tully. I mean, the matches with Tully, they were fantastic because Tully can make anyone look good as well. I think Tully is a little underrated at times. The way when people look at what he could do in the ring, I always felt Tully was a little underrated. So you were going to get something different. The question has to be asked is, what would that first championship reign for Magnum have looked like? Because when I look at Crockett at that time period, when I look at the NWA roster, when I look at the guys that we used coming out of late 86 and into 87 in our reality world, there are not a lot of, outside of the Horsemen, there are not a lot of top flight heels. And realistically, what I see is I see Magnum being just locked in with the Horsemen for in an ongoing, almost in the role that Dusty plays in 87, which is a few, probably a couple of some rematches with Flair, maybe some rematches with Tully. He's just had the series of matches with Nikita Koloff. Now, Nikita was turned babyface because of Magnum's accident. So Nikita is still running as a heel in early 87, but he's got the US title, and probably he and Dusty are probably going to be, those two will be feuding. So outside of the Horsemen, is there much there for Magnum? And this, I guess, is, when I think about what might have happened with his title reign, I wonder whether his first championship reign would have ended up being nothing more than what a bunch of other baby faces got in the 80s. Guys like Dusty Rhodes, Tommy Rich, even Ricky Steamboat, a few months on top before, due to a lack of heel opponents, you got to drop it back to Flair. I don't know. What do you think?
I think this is a weird one for me in the sense that, because I feel like if Magnum had won the title at Starrcade 86, I'll be honest, I think Flair is devastated, and I think he takes time off. And then I think the Horseman, I think he gets some other opponents. I think Nikita stays a heel, and you get some more Magnum Nikita matches in 87 where Nikita can go on camera and say, look, I beat you. I beat you. I beat you for this belt. I will beat you for that belt. I think you'll get feuds with Tully, because Tully will say, hey, man, I beat you once. And we all know those matches were great. And I think Tully was, I think all the Horsemen were elevated enough. Like everyone says, oh, they're all just mid-card guys. No, they weren't. The main event in Crockett, conceivably could have been 5 guys deep. All of the Horsemen could have been main eventers. I think everybody knows that. I mean, certainly Arn, no doubt.
Yep.
So what I think would have happened is that I think that Magnum would have won the title, and I think that he would have feuded with Tully. I think he would have feuded with Nikita, and I have a feeling Flair would have taken maybe the first half of 87 off. I think he still would have cut promos. Maybe they would have invented an injury, because they didn't want to have the same storyline they had with Ole, where they say to Ole, well, you haven't really paid attention. You're snot-nosed kid. I'm in watching that. One of my chrono watches. I'm in March, April of 87 right now in Crockett. So I think they would have had to do some kind of an injury angle where Flair is on camera but not wrestling to keep the Horsemen strong. But I think they would have given him, because, I mean, he pretty much wrestled nonstop when he won the title in 81 to pretty much that point. So I think a healthy Magnum as world champion throughout a decent amount of 1987. I think he could have feuded with Tully. He could have feuded with Nikita, because I don't think Nikita would have turned face, which means Koloff wouldn't have had to bring in that Vladimir Petrov guy. Although I have a feeling they would have brought him in anyway, because Nikita Khrushchev, the real guy who ran Russia.
Mikhail Gorbachev.
Russia, I know Mikhail Gorbachev, yeah. Crusher Khrushchev left because by mid-87, even though Randy Cully was originally Demolition Smash, I think by like July, August, it was Barry Darsow. So
it was earlier than that. He was Randy. I'm a big Demolition fan, so
yes.
Randy Cully basically did the first set of TV tapings at late 86, early 87. Identified straight away. Barry Darsow was in the paint before WrestleMania 3. There's a set of tapings where he's definitely made an appearance in before WrestleMania 3 under the paint. But he was struggling with an injury, and they didn't really go full time with the gimmick until probably May of 87. But he certainly appeared on camera under the paint in a couple of squash matches before WrestleMania 3. Mm-hmm. So yeah. Okay. So yeah, but Darsow was gone.
All right. So they might have brought in Vladimir Petrov anyway. You know what they would have done? They probably wouldn't have turned Dick Murdoch heel, because Dick Murdoch had come in, because Murdoch and Ivan Koloff would end up winning the U.S. tag titles in March of '87 because Ronnie Garvin got hurt, and him and Barry Windham, and Barry Windham had just been in a little program. There's a guy that I don't think he would have turned heel, but Barry might have latched on to Dusty, and I think you would have had this Barry, Dusty, Magnum triad of like white hot baby faces.
Yeah,
around '87.
Let me throw this idea out, because I wanted to come back to Barry, because I think Barry would become a key figure in what would have ended up happening with Magnum, because I think I agree. I think I could see a realm if Flair takes some time off. I could see Magnum running the gamut, just different guy. Every loop. He beats Tully, he beats Arn. Probably has some matches with Luger, who's in the Horsemen in '87. Like you said, rematch. Nikita Koloff, Great American Bash, '87. He probably has some matches with him. Like you said, the Nikita running the idea of I beat you. Flair comes back later in the year, and I wonder. I could actually see a catalyst being that Wyndham's had a run as well. He's beating everyone as well, and you start to have those conversations, like the rankings have Barry Windham as the number one contender or the number two contender. He's always right near the top because he's winning a lot. And maybe you get this situation, you coming into maybe Starrcade '87. Maybe you get the big rematch with Flair at the 12-month mark, Starrcade '87, but coming into it, Barry's been wanting a shot at the winner. I want my shot, a shot at the winner. And maybe Magnum's playing the friendship card. Look, mate, we're friends. I've just got to focus on Flair and I've got to do this. And maybe Flair is coming out and saying, when I win the title, you'll get that shot. And at Starrcade '87, perhaps it's Barry Windham who costs Magnum TA the title. Windham turns heel slightly earlier than he did. We also know that Luger is going to turn babyface at the same time period, so you can almost... This becomes the catalyst. Barry turns... For Barry Windham joining the Horsemen, Barry turns heel on Magnum, costs him the title. The title ends up back on Flair. Magnum and Barry Windham start a massive feud. Flair's got the belt back. And Barry is brought in to replace Luger in the Horsemen when Luger has his hissy fit and leaves within a couple of weeks of Starrcade. And it's that grand design. And it comes back to here was the grand design of the Horsemen, distract Magnum and get the belt back off him. And then Magnum and Barry can start that big feud that, Dusty took over in '88. Mm-hmm. And you've opened the door for Flair to... Because... The issue I have for Magnum, the one thing that you've got that is going to be an issue for long-term success for Magnum is the rise of Sting in 1988. Because Sting comes to his prominent role in early '88. The charisma, the face paint, and the energy that he was and the reactions he was getting. 1988 is when Sting rises up the card, and you're going to be looking at, can Magnum and Sting coexist? And I think they will start to look at putting the Rocket, which they did. They looked at Sting as being the next guy to build up and raise up, and to do that, they need the belt back on Flair. And so getting the belt back on Flair in after maybe a 12-month reign, and putting Magnum into a blood feud with Barry Windham, that keeps Magnum occupied for a while, and it allows Sting to be moved into the position that Magnum's held for the past 2 years.
I tell you, I gotta dig that. I like the I still like the Barry angle. Great job on that, Dave. I didn't even think of that because Barry didn't turn heel until '88, so you could turn him heel a little earlier, and I think I'd go with that.
And maybe tied in with that, it might be around that time period where you do turn you turn Nikita face, and Nikita and Magnum become those unlikely allies after the big blood feud that they'd had in 86 and 87. Nikita becomes that ally to Magnum that he didn't have in a way that Nikita did to Dusty. I guess where I'm coming from, and I guess I feel that Magnum TA really fills the role that Dusty did. And, Dusty sort of stuck around when he probably shouldn't. The rise of, Magnum's, if he doesn't get hurt, he probably takes that prominent role that Dusty hung on to for longer than he should have.
Yeah, clearly. Perhaps, Dusty still gets that token win at the Great American Bash. In fact, that match, this is perplexing to me. I mean, it's not an awful match. Just on a side note, Dave, that Flair Dusty cage match from Bash 86 was PWI's match of the year. And I'm thinking, really? There wasn't anything better in 86. I mean, I'm not exactly saying it was Hogan Bundy. I wouldn't have made that the match of the year, but I mean, good Lord. Had to have been, I mean, the match of the year in 1987, of course, was much, much better. We all know what match that was. But I digress. You know me, Dave. I got to stick that match. I got to slide that. I think every episode of our show, I've slid the Steamboat Savage match in somewhere. I think it's part of my gimmick. But no, I love the Barry thing. Great. I love that idea. Maybe do it a year earlier instead of in 88. And also, Dave, you probably don't get that weird, and I think you mentioned it. You don't get that weird Ronnie Garvin win in September of 87, and maybe Starrcade. What would you have? I was going through some notes when you were saying something. Did you mention what you thought would be the main event for Starrcade 87?
Yeah, that's where I said it would be Magnum and Flair's big rematch, the 12 months,
okay,
12 months in the waiting, and
that's what I thought.
Then, okay. And that's where Barry does the turn there, and helps Flair regain the title.
Okay, my bad. I thought you had done it earlier in the year. Okay, good. My bad. All right, that makes great sense. I agree. And then 88. I mean, listen, Crockett. We can't forget this. Crockett is eventually going to. Crockett is eventually going to put Luger in the main events. It's Luger. It's he's he's good looking. He's chiseled. He's got he's got the work rate of a pincushion, but he's Luger. I mean, he's a chiseled, good looking guy. So yeah, I would have eventually he would have had to be, well,
I think the question that needs to be asked of Magnum is, with the rise of Sting and Luger in 88 and 89, does Magnum jump to WWE?
Oh,
does Magnum, is that the time period where Magnum, and again, I keep talking almost this Dusty persona, this Dusty stand-in, and I don't want to sound like that, and maybe he doesn't jump that early, but I just get this feeling like if the company starts overlooking Magnum for Sting and Luger, does Magnum jump to WWE? And he probably they could get more out of him because he was younger, because he's fitter and stronger. Maybe Magnum fills the roles of the Brutus Beefcakes or the Kerry Von Erichs in 89-90, going into matches with Rick Rude and Mr. Perfect for the IC title. Is he going to do a little spell down in, does he do the jump? I mean, would he I could certainly see him being targeted. As you said, he was popular, he was over, he had a big fan base, and he could work.
Yes. Unfortunately, Dave, there's one thing about Magnum that I think would have held him back a little bit, and particularly for WWF, and that is his promo skills. His skills on the stick were average at best. And in Crockett, you could kind of get away with that because with guys like Flair and Dusty that good, you could kind of hide your promo skills under the radar because the promo promo philosophies in Crockett were very different than Vince's promo philosophies because of the character-driven way that the Federation era ran. Magnum could be like that very intense but serious and legit feelinged out promo. That's not how Vince's baby faces are. And I don't know if that would have flown. However, I'm gonna do a little spin in our looking glass, Dave. Now, as you know, there was a very strong rumor that Flair was going to leave Crockett in '88, and he was supposed to be involved in some capacity with SummerSlam '88, which would have been fucking awesome. That might have actually happened then, because I think what would have happened is Flair would have been like, you know what? You got Magnum as a top babyface. Dusty's kind of waning off on being an everyday worker. Now you can make Luger kind of a topish heel, and Barry, something of that nature, where you could cultivate some other heels with a Magnum babyface at the top to go with maybe some other guys. Because don't forget, another guy kind of, and this would look really good for Magnum TA, another guy kind of bubbles up the top of the babyface ladder in 1988. And I think you know who I'm talking about, Dave. I'm talking about the man called Sting. And by that point, Sting and Magnum would have been, oh my God, the women would have eaten them like birthday cake. And I think you would have built up guys like Flair, like Luger, and you would have had some other heels. And Flair might have left anyway. But I mean, again, I think we might be going too deep in the weeds on other people. As for how long Magnum's value as a main eventer would have been, he might have lasted through the rest of the 80s, but I have a feeling that by the time the Mid-South UWF merger happens and Ted comes in and we transfer into WCW, I feel like Magnum's kind of very vanilla babyface yet stoic personality might have kind of lost the fans. So I feel like maybe by 1990, maybe by then Magnum makes a run, kind of like Dusty did in '89. Maybe at that point Magnum possibly makes a run in the WWF.
Either that, or do you turn him heel? Does he join the Horsemen in 1990? And does he feud with Sting then?
I don't know.
I don't know if it would have worked.
I don't think it would have worked at all. Because if Magnum's promo skills were average as a babyface, they would have tanked as a heel.
Yeah.
You got to have some stick skills to be a top flight heel, and Magnum just didn't have it.
Yeah.
And if you want to know more about Magnum, shameless plug here, and his run, please check out one of the great shows here on the PTB Wrestling Network, and that is, of course, NWA Crock and Roll. Sean, Dr. G, Callum, and Sean and Scott Shiflett and their other guests. Right now, they're in the spring of 1986 in their timeline, Dave. So they're right in that stretch with Magnum and Nikita and all that. So you're seeing the build there. So check it out. Check out the NWA Crock and Roll here on the PTB Wrestling Network, because right now they're in that timeline of March, April, May, June of 1986. So, yeah. But in terms of a heel turn, Dave, I don't know if it would have worked.
Yeah,
I
agree.
He didn't have strong enough mic skills as a babyface, but he could have gotten away with it because he was good looking and he was a champion and he wins matches. But if he's got to cut like angry heel promos and then try to job, I don't know how that would have gone.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
I think that's the key. And we probably would have seen a little bit of a fizz out. Maybe he becomes one of those guys, journeyman bouncing around the indies. Maybe he's a guy who gets maybe he's a guy that Paul Heyman uses in the early days of ECW to help.
I just thought of that myself.
Get his or Cornette down in Smoky Mountain. You could see him being that sort of prominent guy that's used to help build the early days of those companies. But I think I agree with you the lack of talent on the mic is going to impact there. So. Well, from talking about needing to have talent on the mic as a heel, I think that's a good opportunity to move into our second guy. Unless you've got anything more you want to share about Magnum, I think we're at a point where we can move on to our second journey for the day.
Yeah, no, I think we're good. I think we're good on Magnum. Yeah, that's about as good as he was going to go.
Well, in the 90s, there were not many better heels on the microphone. Once you moved Ric Flair out of the equation, there weren't many better heels on the microphone than the man himself, ravishing Rick Rude.
Correct.
He was fantastic. He was someone who just got better and better, I think, as his career moved on. And as we all know, in 1994, Rick Rude is in the midst of his international World Heavyweight Championship run, because the WCW withdrew from the NWA just as Rude was given that title run. So Rude was in a very top position in WCW in early 94. And we know, those of you who are fans know that in around about May 1984, he was wrestling Sting in Japan. And it was actually May 1st, 1994, wrestling Sting in Japan, and he suffered a significant injury to his back, which it ended his in-ring career. And as of that point, he had to, he actually won the International World title back from Sting on that event, which is something I didn't realize until I was prepping for this. I knew that Sting had beaten him not long before it, and I thought Sting just held it. I thought that was part of the plans and the preparations for bringing in Hulk Hogan into WCW, was to get that belt off Rude and move it to Sting, to move it to Flair, to unify everything and prepare the run for Hogan. So Rude had to forfeit that title, and his career's over. And there's someone I'd like, because when this injury happened, I think without question, Rude was at the absolute peak of his career at that point. He, in ring and on the mic, there were few that were better than Rick Rude in early to mid 94. So what might have happened with Rick Rude if his back injury hadn't occurred? What might his in-ring career have looked like moving forward? And Rick Rude he's one of my favorites. He's one of those heels that from early on, I always enjoyed his work. I always enjoyed the arrogance that he brought, and the insulting the fans before the match. I loved his pre-match stuff. It always brought a laugh to me. And I loved, the work he did. I think we've talked about this before. The work he did with Ultimate Warrior in '89 is just sensational.
Of course.
He just had these two sensational matches with Ultimate Warrior in '89, and we talked about that in our Warrior episode and sort of harked in on that. He comes to WCW. He's at the peak of his game. He had some great matches with Flair the year before, and matches with Sting, and everything he did just seemed to be working, and then he's out hurt. So what happens with Rude if he stays healthy? Does he get the opportunity to win a legitimate World Heavyweight Championship? And I say legitimate because the international world title was not, with the withdrawal from the NWA, that was just, they had to work out what to do with it, and it was never really seen and viewed in the same light as the WCW title. So Where does he go? And tied in with that is obviously Hulk Hogan's arrival in WCW. Now, I'm going to put it out there right at the start. It is common knowledge. It is well known that Hogan and Rude did not get along, did not like each other. There's been a lot of stuff that's come out that Hogan refused to wrestle Rude when he was WWF champion in that sort of 88, 89, 90 time period. Didn't want to have a bar of him, probably because of Rude's legitimate. He was seen as a legitimate guy, a guy who could actually do what needed to be done if you didn't want to work with him. We know that Rude did not like Hogan because of it. That's pretty common knowledge. So Hogan comes to WCW. Does Rude hang around? What happens to Rude? Does he stay? Can they work a Hogan Rude match? Or does Rude need to go and find greener pastures elsewhere? What are your thoughts there, Scott?
Well, Dave, I was just thinking about what would have happened in a Hogan world in WCW. Rude and Hogan rarely crossed paths in the WWF. Maybe the one, probably the one Survivor Series match in '87, but really their paths never crossed, probably because Rude was a great heel. What about let's have two scenarios here. Number one, let's say that Rude sticks around. They merge those titles. Now, it was common knowledge, and I have one of the matches on my top 100, but watching the feud between Rude and Flair in the fall of 1993, those matches were not that great. They were okay. They were average. They did not have chemistry. Having said that, somehow, I think you couldn't have Rude in the company and not go after Hogan after Flair drops it at Bash at the Beach 94, because that was happening regardless. That was a Bischoff thing, and he was definitely going to do that.
That was why Hogan was brought in. He was brought in to win the title.
Yeah, immediately. I mean, fucking immediately. So the question then is, what happens then? Rude seems like such a guy, a great heel worker, that you weren't just going to have him float around the mid-card wrestling like DDP and Johnny B. Bad and, these fucking guys. I don't think that was going to happen. You had to put your issues to the side and try to get a feud, a Rude Hogan feud going. Unless Rude sees the writing on the wall and he's going to turn into he's going to become Vader 95 and just job over and over again, and he's like, the hell with this shit. I'm not going to be this guy's punching bag. Screw that. I'm going back. I'm going to talk to Vince, and I'm coming back. And we see, instead of Sid, how about Rick Rude in, quote, the corporation? Instead of Sid. And Sid could be in the corporation, but he could be a side guy. You get Rude in the corporation, and you're talking about some epic matches with Diesel. Because I think because one thing about Rude, Dave, Rude can work with big guys. We saw that with Ultimate Warrior. So I think Rude and Diesel matches in 1995, I think, would be epic. And I think it would totally change the fabric of the WWF in 1995.
Yeah. I can't agree with you more.
Don't get you're not going to get this in your house one shit shows and these horrendous matches between Diesel and Sid in the middle of 1995. You just don't get them. You're just not going to get them. Because I can't see Rude sticking around in WCW being a mid-card punching bag and then eventually just become another, he'll pretty much be what he probably would have been in the Federation era, a Hogan heel being vanquished.
Yeah.
And now he's seeing Hogan, 6 years later in WCW, and he's like, screw this. I'm not going to sit here and be this guy's punching bag. Go ahead, Vader, you fat bastard. You think you're a hot shot? Go ahead. Take the payday while you're looking at the lights every other month. He's like, I'm out of here. And he didn't leave on bad terms.
No.
Rude in 1990 in WWF. So I am sure that Vince would have brought him back. And you put him in the corporation, and he would have fit perfectly in the corporation, even better than Sid in 1995. And maybe the corporation as a gimmick is not as crappy as it ended up being. And you get matches with Diesel, better matches with Diesel. You don't have to feud with even if you have the feuds, Dave, with Sid. Let's just do this, and I'll get your point. Let me just get this out because I'll forget. So, all right, he has a couple matches with Sid. Say Rude instead of stupid Mabel. Say Rude wins the King of the Ring tournament. First of all, he makes for a better pay-per-view than the pile of slop we ended up getting. And it's Rude and Diesel at King of the Ring 95. It's at SummerSlam 95. And you get a great match. Diesel does win, but somewhere in the fall, instead of Brett getting that token title reign back that pissed him off for 6 months, somehow Rude wins the title at Survivor Series 95. He holds the belt throughout the spring, and Shawn takes it from Rude at WrestleMania 12. And you you still give him an Iron Man match. Because don't forget, Rick Rude went 30 minutes with Ricky Steamboat, and you could debate on who's a better worker between Ricky Steamboat and Shawn Michaels. That could be a battle in everybody's own mind. But you put Rude and Shawn at WrestleMania 12, and we might be onto something. Yeah. And then Brett doesn't have to cry that his reign was crap because all he was being fed to Shawn eventually. If that pissed him off so much, fine. Rude will do it. You tell me Rick Rude wouldn't want to be in the main event of WrestleMania? Of course he would. And he gets a 60-minute Iron Man match. He would have done it. Now, how far would he have stuck around after that? I don't know. Because by then he was getting up there in age. He was in his mid-30s by then. So it's a question of how long he would have lasted.
It's an interesting look. Now, I'm just going to ask you: are you sure you are not looking at you sure you're not down here in Australia looking over my shoulder at my notes, because you have literally taken my concepts for what would have happened.
That's why our show is so great, Dave. That is why we're as damn good as we are.
I agree totally. I think, like you said, if Rude, the question comes: can Rude and Hogan coexist? Now, if you can get something, can you imagine after the Flair series if Starrcade 94 was Hogan versus Rude to unify those two titles? Now, there's a match. And yes, Hogan's going to go over, but if you can at least maybe pay Rude enough or get these guys on the page, they could work something. You've got a better Starrcade 94 right there.
Yes.
But coming out of that, I don't see Rude hanging around to play job boy and to go back down to the mid card. I agree with that. I think he gets his payday with Hogan, and probably on what is WCW's biggest show of the year. that's their version of WrestleMania. I could see him sticking around, dropping the belt there, and then leaving. And then, like you said, he comes into WWE. He moves in, whether he wins, whether it happens earlier in the year in '95 or whether he moves in. I see that. I agree with you. He becomes that a guy who can work against Diesel, make Diesel look good, have a great feud with him, and probably you could put the title on him at Survivor Series instead of Brett. And then Rude can have an in-your-house match against Brett, or even better, he wrestles Brett at the Royal Rumble. Now, that would have made that Rumble match fantastic instead of the Bret Hart Undertaker schmozzle that we get.
Yep.
Rude and Brett can tear the house down there. And Brett and Rude were friends. Brett would have had no problem putting Rude over. Imagine these two guys who like each other and respect each other would have put on a match for the ages. Probably would have had that match of the year candidate. Then you move into, as you said, he can drop the belt to Shawn at WrestleMania. He's had that world title reign. But I see a lot more upside to him over the next couple of years. Shawn and they have a rematch there, and then Shawn does his thing for moving sort of out of that time, and Shawn can have the guys that he meets, and maybe Rude is having matches in the upper card against against a Luger, although Luger had gone back, I guess, at that point. But, maybe he has some more matches with Brett, and they keep that feud rolling. You probably haven't had to turn Davey Boy Smith heel yet. He could have a couple of matches with Davey Boy. You could have him in those prominent roles and then use him to elevate some guys. Maybe it's Rick Rude that's used to help introduce and elevate Hunter Hearst Helmsley instead of what they did with Mr. Perfect. Maybe it's Rick Rude who is giving shine to guys like Mark Merrow and Gold Dust to help get them up and running. But I actually see the upside of Rude coming when if he hangs. So he has a title reign from 95 to 96. Shawn holds it run. You could even put the belt back on him later in the year. I can see Rude being someone who could have multiple reigns. You could put the belt back on him, maybe instead of Sid. Maybe he has a short reign. Or maybe when Shawn's injury happens the following year, the knee injury, and he took his ball and went home, maybe Rude and Brett square off at the following year's WrestleMania, because and Brett gets the title back there. Instead of and then they can he can have some Austin stuff after that. But maybe Rude is used to put the title back on to Brett for a while. And maybe he has a bit of a time off at this point, has a few months, maybe 6 months off, recovers, recuperates. Austin and Brett do their thing, and you've got the build for Austin. And then when Austin wins the title, Rude returns, and Rude is the first guy to challenge Stone Cold.
Be pretty great.
They're friends as well. And
yes.
You're holding off on maybe what you did with Dude Love, but Rick Rude could be the corporate choice. Rick Rude could have been the man who fits the image that Vince McMahon wants, because that's who Rick Rude was. And you use that as a catalyst for helping Austin's first championship reign. I can see Rude, if he stayed fit for 2 or 3 years, having a couple of championship reigns there to help elevate other guys, with the purpose of probably coming out of that time period, that as you move into the Attitude Era. I mean, he would have been perfect to work with, Shawn Michaels he was there with DX. Imagine if he was actually able to go in ring. Imagine a team of Michaels and Rude causing havoc for a while, or Rude makes like I said, Rude's had the time off. He makes the comeback in early '88, and then maybe it's Rude who takes over leadership of DX, and Rude then, perhaps gets turned babyface in the process, because like what happened with DX and Hunter, and Rude puts over The Rock, and Rude is used to elevate guys, but in a prominent role. I could see Rude filling that role quite well.
And because I know when the first thing people, I'm sure all of you listening, thought of when you heard that we were doing Rude as an example tonight, you were thinking, well, he died in 99. What would have happened after 99? No. I think that if this happens and he doesn't get hurt, he doesn't die. I mean, I can't guarantee that he didn't die between 1999 and now, but I don't think he dies in 99 because he was trying to get in shape to get back into the ring, and he was kind of mixing his meds, and that ultimately is what took him out. I don't think that happens because he's consistently in the ring right now. He's consistently wrestling, so I don't know if he needs to take these cocktails that he was taking in 98 and 99 in the real world and not the looking glass, that ended up leading to his death of a heart attack in April of 99. So how much longer would he have lived? I don't know. I'm sure he obviously would not have wrestled, I don't think, into the 2000s. I think he would have probably called it quit because he was 40 in 99. So I don't know how deep into the 2000s. Maybe he might have wrestled through the invasion, maybe. But by ruthless aggression, he probably have been like, I'm good. I don't know. How far do you think, Dave?
I think if he kept wrestling full time, I think come the time of the invasion, he probably would have needed time off, and the character of Rick Rude probably wouldn't have worked well. I think in the invasion, if he'd been around, he might have become a little bit stale like X-Pac did, and people sort of turn off him. But if he sort of goes away for a while, then you could use him as one of those legend guys who comes back every now and then. Bring him back at post-invasion. You could use him to come back for a few months and elevate a couple of guys. Then he goes away again for a little while. Then he comes back, or maybe he's a guy that TNA signs in their early days, and he has a bit of a run there and helps put that promotion on the map. As sort of a back end of his career. But I do think he's probably someone, because apart from how good he was in the ring, he's well known to be a very strong family guy as well. His family was very important to him, and so you could see that probably in the early 2000s, his family would have been getting older. He probably would have wanted to spend more time with them and less of an in-ring schedule.
Well, as you've heard, as you were saying earlier, that Bret Hart has said that even though he had the persona, he was not like Ric Flair, who lived the persona. He was a dedicated family man. As a matter of fact, this is something I didn't realize till I just looked it up now. He kept his wedding ring on during his matches. He did not. A lot of guys took it off. He just taped over it. Because he was so dedicated, he did not want to lose his ring, and he didn't want any people thinking he was not married. So,
in fact, you know what I would actually see probably happen? Just thinking about it right now, I think after if he puts over Austin, I think the direction the Attitude Era took, I could see Rude almost making statements that Bret Hart did. Even though he'd left, sort of like this isn't for me. This direction is the nudity, the real pushing of the TNA the T and A side of things. I could see Rude going, you know what, I need to get out of here, because I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to put that pressure on my wife and my family. I don't want people to think that that's who I am. So he maybe leaves for a while to come back later. Like I said, come back later and do stuff at different times, but maybe starts to wind down his career as the Attitude Era really takes off.
Because he looks like the kind of guy that would have always stayed in shape too. He wouldn't have gotten the dad bod. He wouldn't have gotten very doughy. I have a feeling he would have stayed in as good a shape as he possibly could have.
Yeah.
So I could see him coming back in like 2003, 2005, 2006, one shots, whatever. And then maybe, maybe that's a guy Vince perhaps trusts as a backstage guy, as an agent.
Yeah.
Maybe that's something he would have liked. But I agree with you about the Attitude Era thing. Like, it's one thing to have that gimmick during the Federation era when you knew it was definitely a gimmick. But in the Attitude Era, when the black and white definitely shaded gray, I don't know if Rude would have gotten away with it without thinking that's actually what he does. And obviously, as I mentioned, very loyal to his wife. So, yeah. So, but I think he would have had a good run. I think he would have had a good run. I think he would have been a World Wrestling Federation champion, which he deserved
multiple times, and a Hall of Famer. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer anyway, but I think that real Hall of Fame type career.
Right. So just to reiterate, everybody, we're not talking about what would have happened if he didn't die, because that really has nothing to do with this. We're talking about what would have happened had he not had that terrible back injury in May or June or whatever it was or April of 1994. Because we think that if he's not hurt, he doesn't push himself to try to get back in shape, take a bunch of bad meds, and die in his sleep, which is what he did do in April of 1999. We don't think that would have happened at all. Would he have kept living? I don't know. I mean, who knows what happens at that point? But we're talking more from an in-ring perspective and what would have kept him going, not necessarily. We don't think he would have died in 1999. Let's put it that way. I mean, again, he was known as a guy who did take steroids, so we don't know how his body would have handled things later on in life. But that doesn't necessarily. We're not saying that. We're just saying that we think that had he continued his career and reached so many great heights in the late 90s, that he wouldn't have had to push himself with the medications and stuff to get back in shape, that he would not have. We don't think he would have passed away in sleep. So, but yeah, I think I'm pretty proud of ourselves on that one, Dave. I think we pretty much made Rude an even better Hall of Famer than he already was.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
well, talking about people who unfortunately passed away in their sleep, the next guy, and I don't know that we'll need to spend too long on this guy, but the next guy is someone who sadly did pass away in his sleep, and a guy that I don't think had reached as high as he could have gotten in the business, and that's Brian Pillman. Passed away in his sleep in late 1997, and right in the middle, sort of just as Austin's on his rise and the Hart Foundation as a stable are at their peak, not long before the screw job happens, Pillman is in the midst of a storyline with Goldust, and as we all know, passes away the night before the pay-per-view. Bad Blood pay-per-view. Very, very sad. And I remember this one. I remember, this one being something that did. I think it was that shock of just such a sudden change in the middle of a storyline. This is the first one that I remember from a storyline perspective had such a hit. And so I guess there's the question. Pillman is a guy who was already struggling with injuries and issues. If he doesn't pass away in his sleep, if he does get to continue wrestling even for a couple of years, what does his career look like? Where do things go? And I want to lay the foundation here. The screw job still happens. So,
yeah, definitely. One had nothing to do with the other. Yeah.
No. So I believe Pillman would have stayed in the WWF. He was contracted. He was there. He might have been tight with the Hart family, but I don't think that he would have been leaving. I think, like Owen, he would have ended up being able to find a way to stay and to work there, because he was just really coming into his spot, having overcome all those injuries. He was just getting back into in-ring shape to the point where he probably knew he couldn't go back to WCW. He burned the bridge there. He really didn't have any other options. So where do things go for the loose cannon? Where do things take him in late 97 and early 98? I think what we see is at least in the initial stage post screw job, we probably see something similar with Owen. He probably initially threatens to quit. He and Owen are probably talking quite regularly, and in the same way they were able to negotiate with Owen to stay, I see Pillman staying, and maybe like Owen, maybe he and Owen come back initially, and they're feuding with DX in that December January time period. They come back and maybe they're feuding with DX in the ring and on Raw in the lead up to WrestleMania. Owen working, tag matches against Shawn and Hunter and, bits and pieces. Pillman probably in the No Way Out match. Possibly, maybe we don't see the arrival of Terry Funk. Maybe, Pillman's in that match along with Owen and HBK against DX. I could see that as being something that happens. But I think it's post WrestleMania where Pillman would really come into his own, because I think that's the point. Maybe not the first challenger, but that's the point they really draw back on the history between Pillman and Stone Cold. And I see Pillman and Austin having a massive feud over the world title in 1998. I think that's where his career would have gone. He has a couple of pay-per-view matches with Austin. Drops them, loses them, but they're able to draw on that history. The company are now starting to talk about history. These guys used to be tag team partners. They can talk about how they were friends for a while, and now it's Pillman. Maybe Pillman's jealous of where Austin's come to. Maybe Pillman can talk about how you injured my ankle and you stopped me from getting in that position. You've got that opportunity to build them and put them in a couple of high-profile matches before Austin maybe moves on to his series with The Undertaker and everything that happened with The Undertaker and Kane. And Pillman moves from there into probable, maybe an IC title run, maybe some a tag title reign with Owen Hart. I think a lot of Pillman gets tied up with Austin and then Owen. If he doesn't pass away.
Yeah, I definitely think, because he was Owen didn't let me rephrase this. Owen didn't leave because he didn't want to leave. He couldn't leave because he was under contract. The rest of the guys were able to bail. Pillman, I think, would have told Brett. This is where I think the bond of the Hart family. I think Pillman would have told Brett, "I'll keep an eye on him. We'll keep an eye on each other. Don't worry about it. We'll be okay." Because deep down, it was all an act. Pillman knew it. So, he would have been. I think him and Owen would have protected each other from whatever shit was going on at the end of 1997. We all know it was a big mess. I think they would have weathered the storm. I think Pillman would have kept the Goldust feud going, and he might have, goofed off a little bit early in 98. Maybe had a pretty great match. At WrestleMania 14 with somebody. And then, and I've talked about this with JR many times on our show over the years, Pillman is the guy and not, Pillman is the guy and not Dude Love that gets those title shots in at Unforgiven 98 and Over the Edge 98.
Yeah.
And they're bangers. I think because Stone Cold, obviously him and Brian were, Brian, my guy Brian. They had their same chains and everything. I think they would have acknowledged that they were in the Hollywood Blondes. Which, by the way, I'm looking right at their WWF Classic Superstars tag team package figures, Dave. I have them on my wall of Pillman and Austin, because let's be honest, the Hollywood Blondes were awesome. I think you would have got some great promos from the two of them. Obviously, there was nowhere else for Pillman to go. he would have made more money in the WWF than he would have obviously in ECW. He was definitely not. I mean, if as long as Eric Bischoff was running things, he was never going back to WCW.
Never going back.
No, never going back to WCW. I don't think he wanted to anyway. I respect you, Booker Man. I think that's going to stick in their craw for a while. And then I think he would have just kind of had fun. I would have loved to have seen. I agree with you. I think instead of, I mean, the New Age Outlaws were the heel team in '98. But I'll tell you something. A Pillman Owen tag team, Dave, would have been amazing. And the chemistry between them, when they were together in '97 in the Hart Foundation, they were awesome. They were awesome. Remember when they were wrestling in that European title match and they were kind of like pretend goofing off and fake arm bars. Oh, it was hilarious. They had amazing chemistry together. And whether it was in the ring or just cutting promos, I think Pillman and Owen, and we're going to get, obviously, you might listeners think of who we're probably about to talk about next, would have thrived in that setting in '98 and would have been a pretty damn good tag team. And I think Pillman would have probably lasted. I hate to say this, Dave, and this will be the only guy I'll talk about this with. I'll say this about tonight. I just feel like Pillman was cursed. And I have a feeling something was going to happen to him sometime down the line. Let's put it this way. If he didn't die that morning, I hate to say this, God strike me down. If he didn't die the morning of Bad Blood '97, he would have died at some point down the line. I don't think he still would be here with us today. I hate to say that. That's just how Brian was. And if not
an early death, I think his body wouldn't have coped for many more years. His body would have broken down. Like, he would have suffered the more injuries. He'd be the sort of guy that he couldn't stay in ring fit, and he'd have to retire due to injury. Like I said, a tag run with Owen, but I wouldn't be surprised if by the time you get to that Invasion time period that his body had just hit the point where he couldn't compete anymore. And he's had to retire due to injuries, permanent. Like, and he makes that occasional appear, like these guys do. He becomes a guy that you could bring out as, and maybe, if he has to retire due to injury, maybe he becomes the color commentator on SmackDown. Mm-hmm. Maybe they turn and use him in that role. Look to use him as a commentator rather than have him retire off into the sunset.
Right. That's entirely possible. Yeah, I don't not see that, because I do think eventually, his body couldn't handle it, which sucks because I really would have liked to have. I mean, think about it. Had we been able to see him through the Invasion as he'd be an awesome babyface, totally pro WWF. Obviously, he was not gonna. I think he would have just told Vince, I got to be on your side. You can't have me. I can't be with WCW. They're not going to. It would not have been believable. So had Brian been healthy enough to get to the Invasion in 2001, I think he probably would have been a pro WWF babyface guy.
I tell you what would have been fun. If he was able to make it that far just before the Invasion storyline happened when Austin turned heel, can you imagine Pillman slipping into that two-man power trip and you get the reunification of the Hollywood Blondes with the Loose Cannon and Crazy amazing. Stone Cold?
Oh my God.
That would have been awesome.
And they could have gone back and wore their Hollywood Blondes vests and done the whole picture thing with their hands and done that their awesome theme. Oh my God, man, that would have been amazing. I got to be honest, that would have been amazing. But I do think, sadly, that his body would not have been able to handle much of anything by 2002, and something tells me, I hate to say it, I still don't think he'd be with us today. He's the only one here that we're going to talk about tonight that I think would still have passed away at some point. I hate to say it. That's just my opinion. I don't know. Am I being too morose, Dave? I don't know.
No, I think like we said, his body had been through so much. even just trying to keep it together. If he managed to keep his body together, eventually his body would have broken down. And if he, he's the sort of guy that if he couldn't do it, it might have gutted him to the point that he might have struggled to keep going. And I don't want to. That's just really bringing the morbid mood to the night to the episode. So
right,
maybe, but yeah, I agree with you there. So. So I think maybe we might need to move on from loose cannon.
Yeah, we don't want to get too far deep where we're starting to depress audience.
Well, let's move on to number 4, and we've alluded to this guy a few times already, and I no episode trying to do this could not cover the late great Owen Hart, a man whose career ended in such a tragic way. Should never happen. This is not the episode to talk about that. We're not here to. He was the one I think that was felt by fans more than anything, because he was so loved. He might have been a heel or a baby face, but he was respected by the fan base. He really was in that. He was in that attitude of that realm of the guy who, even if he was a heel, you wanted to cheer him. The way Ric Flair had become in 93, 94, you wanted to cheer him regardless. And he would become, other guys have moved into that role over the years. Mm-hmm. He was respected and had a massive impact on a lot of fans. That the Owen Hart tribute for is sad.
It's a gut punch.
Yeah, it is one of the most memorable ones as well, just because you could see how loved he was, not just by fans but by his comrades, his mm-hmm. fellow superstars. So it's again, we talk about where things were going. It is well known. And we were in the time period of the Blue Blazer when he died coming down, abseiling down into the ring, and the harness didn't work properly and released early, and he fell. But it is well known he was scheduled to win the title that night. It's no mm-hmm. secret. It's a well known fact that Owen Hart, under the guise of the Blue Blazer, was going to win the IC title that night, playing that role of the counter attitude era guy, which he was fun. It was a good role, which in the attitude era he played the baby face of the 80s, but doing it in the attitude era made him the heel, and he did it so well. Where does his career go? Where does his career go if he stays? I mean, obviously the IC title is going to bounce around. He's not going to be the Blue Blazer for a long-term thing. That's not what the gimmick was about. He probably would have been unmasked formally in the ring by someone at some point, like they do with those sorts of gimmicks. Where does his career go? What happens to him moving into 2000 and 2001?
Well, there was a big rumor that I had heard that he was ready to retire from in-ring. He wanted to be a firefighter, and he wanted to move back to Calgary with Martha and is it Oj or is Oj OG or OJ? Is that Brett's kid? No, Brett's kid's Blade.
It's OG is Owen's son.
Is Owen's son. Okay. And I think he wanted to be with his family. And so I got to be honest, in terms of in-ring, I don't know how much longer he was going to go. Would he have wrestled into 2000? Probably. Would he have ever the big question here, though, Dave, whenever he retires, because I think he was going to within the next 3 years. I think Owen was going to retire and move to back to Calgary and be a firefighter. That apparently, a much safer job than being a wrestler, apparently. So let's say this. We're not going to rebook. I'll tell you something. That might be a good separate episode. Booking Owen had he lived as a standalone, because that could be pretty fun. But let's say he stays in the company till, say, Ruthless Aggression. I think by 2002 he probably would have been up there in years. He'd have been probably close to 40, because when he died he was only 34. So he's probably like 30. Let's say he wrestles probably till like 37, which would have been 2002, the end of the Attitude Era and the beginning of Ruthless Aggression. By that point, I think he was probably done. I think he would have gone home to Calgary, done his whatever. But in that stretch, Dave, I'm going to say this. This is going to be very bold on my part. Okay? Do you know who, in my opinion, let's say Owen Hart stays in the company through those next few years. Okay? Do you know who I think will be the most affected by Owen Hart still being alive and wrestling for the next 3 years after 1999? And the answer is Kurt Angle. Because I think if Owen was still alive, Kurt Angle would still be would have still been in. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. I think Kurt Angle would still been in the mid card in 2000, but I do not think he wins the title at No Mercy 2000. I think Owen Hart does.
Okay.
I think Owen Hart does. I think Owen Hart is the heel that beats The Rock at No Mercy 2000 and finally gets what he truly deserved, a world championship. I think the title reign is the same. He holds it through, because I think they were due for Austin Rock at 17. I think that was set in stone. I think the feud is the same. He wrestles Taker, he wrestles the six pack in the cell, he wrestles Triple H, and then he loses to Rock at No Way Out 01. I think the title run is pretty much exactly the same. But I think it's Owen in that slot and not Kurt if Owen is still alive. Oh. And then I think he wrestles through the invasion, But then I think by 2002, I think he tells Vince, I'm good. I'm good.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you on this one. Okay. I don't see that being the direction they would go. I think you would still get the rise of Kurt. In fact, I'd see Owen as a great opponent for Kurt.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They would have some great matches, but I do see Owen getting a title run. I see Owen slipping into Chris Jericho's spot in 2001, and Owen, through the back end of the invasion, takes Chris Jericho's role of never won the big one and gets maybe that WCW title switch with The Rock. But more importantly, he's the one who wins the four-way tournament at Survivor Series 2000. At Armageddon 2001.
Wow.
That's where I see it happening. Within his mind, he wins that. He's going to drop the belt at WrestleMania and he's going to retire. That will be his last match. That WrestleMania match in Canada. He drops the title in Canada in front of that nearly hometown audience, and then he retires. That's what I would see as Owen's opportunity, because I do think, if I look at the picture and the reasons why they put the title on Jericho, it really was looking to do something different with someone who deserved an elevation. And I don't think anyone would have denied Owen that. But I think if Owen hadn't passed away and he stuck around, he would have been the company man. He would have done the jobs for Kurt. He would have done it for Rock and Hunter and all these guys over the years. I think the invasion storyline would have been the perfect opportunity to build him up as a guy who, you could give him a lot of wins in that time period and really almost make him the guy who champions the cause with Hunter out hurt, and Austin and Kurt out hurt, and they're both sort of being on the alliance side of things. Owen could be the in-ring leader of the WWF in that time period, along with The Rock. And then he and The Rock sort of come to blows, and you can harken back to the whole nation thing. We go back to there, and I held you back there, and you never gave me a shot then, and you haven't given me a shot now, and I can do it. Owen gets that win at Armageddon, has a very short run, but with the purpose and plan to retire in 2000 and at WrestleMania in 2002. That's what I think would have happened with Owen.
I like that, Dave. I like mine too, though. But I do like yours. I do like yours, though. Either way, I think Owen would have become world champion at some point. I do think that. I think this. I had this in my mind while you were talking and while you were giving your points. And here's something we have to think about now. Say, all right, Owen doesn't die, so Owen's alive in 99. Goldberg punts him in the head, punts his brother in the head at whatever it was, Starrcade. And Brett's like, you know what? Fuck this place. I'm out of here. I'm going back to WWF. Because I think if Owen hadn't died, I think Brett would not have been I think Brett's rankling would have subsided. And I think Owen and Bulldog, and I mean, Bulldog obviously had his own issues, but I think they'd been like, look, dude, just come back. Just get over it.
Yeah.
And on the other side, I think the hires up in WWF would have been like, Vince, just say you're sorry. Just move on. I think with Owen still alive, I think that would have been facilitated. And I think you see Brett back in the WWF.
I think you're right. I think that's probably and probably coming in that elder statesman. He wouldn't compete very often. He would just come back as in sort of that special role, but he would have been able to have a couple of proper farewell matches.
Because the other thing too is, Dave, I'm going to get this point out. Because you got to think to yourself, and Brett and Vince knew it. Vince said it. Vince said WCW is not going to know what to do with him. And sure enough, the guy shows up at Starrcade 97, and his presence wrecks, through no fault of his own, what was supposed to be an epic main event between Hogan and Sting. Oh, of course, that was mostly Hogan's doing, but by the beginning of 99, he's been with the company a year and a half, and he hasn't sniffed the world title. He finally gets it in October of 99 in this throwaway tournament at Mayhem. Who knows? Even by 99, he's like, you know what? This place sucks. And maybe Owen starts telling him, listen, Vince, let's talk. So I definitely think that had Owen lived, I think the Cold War between Brett and Vince would have probably thawed faster.
Absolutely, because I mean, it's well known that Owen's passing it drove the wedge deeper.
Oh, definitely,
between the two. So if Owen hadn't passed away, I agree. I think he would have been able to thaw things over. Brett may not have been able to come back, like the concussion that he suffered with Goldberg. He may not have ever been able to come back full time, but I do agree he probably would have been able to sort something out to allow a return, and maybe that WrestleMania in 2001, right before the invasion, or maybe not there, maybe post invasion WrestleMania, maybe Brett comes in to have Owen's the champion, and Brett comes out as his second. Brett comes out as his manager. Brett comes out to support his brother in this match that Owen is going to retire with, and then after that, it's the formal retirement, but maybe down the track, they make occasional appearances. Then that legend format, a couple of tag team, maybe a little come back 12 months later and have a 2-month tag team run, and then go back into retirement sort of thing.
And he'd be in the Hall of Fame.
Oh yes,
obviously.
Yes.
We'd have, whether he's alone or whether you put in the full Hart Foundation as a group, sans, of course, British Bulldog, who we do not talk about tonight, probably because he had his issues already, and it had nothing to do with wrestling. He had Had he lived, I don't know how much longer. He might have come back. I put, on a quick side note, I probably would have put Bulldog in the same kind of thing as Owen. He might have done some side shots for a while, and I don't think he would have really made that big of an impact in the business after that anyway. No. Not like Owen. So that's why we didn't include Bulldog tonight. But you may disagree. Listen, at PTBN Wrestling on Twitter, tell us what you think. Since we didn't really delve into Davey Boy Smith tonight, what do you think? Let's say Bulldog does not die in 2002. What would he have done from then to now? Tell us what you think. Hit us on Twitter at PTBN Wrestling. Before we move on to our final guy, Dave, just put this in your head for a minute. Okay? Not as a wrestler, but as a trainer. How about you put Owen Hart in NXT?
Oh. Oh, that would be both of them. Both of them would have been sensational.
Yeah, because I think, again, Brett's whole existence changes if Owen is still alive.
Yes.
And Owen not just in ring, because that's a gimme. But teaching them how to be good, funny heels. Learn not just good promo work, but good comedic timing. Yeah. Owen was all about timing. His timing was impeccable, particularly when him and Pillman were together. And he teaches that to these kids in FCW or even in OVW earlier.
Yeah.
Think about Owen in Kentucky training. Let's just say this for shits and giggles. Let's say he's training in that 03, 04, 05 OVW. And he trains guys like Cena and teaches Cena the whole art of the comedic timing. It took a while for Cena to get it. He might have got it sooner. And then you know who would have been a valuable guy early in his career for Owen Hart to have? And I hate to say it because we just mentioned him earlier, and we talked about him in our debut episode, and that's CM Punk. I think if Owen was around, I think CM Punk would have helped teach him. I know you want to be like that guy, but don't go too far down the rabbit hole of that guy. Yeah. You don't have to live the life of that guy. And now, and I think Owen had that respect that Punk probably would have been like, yeah, you're probably right. Being a company guy to a certain point probably is not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
So, and I think Owen's professional advice would have been invaluable to guys, say, in OVW or FCW or even in NXT. Just imagine Owen Hart. Oh my God. Holy crap. I just realized something else amazing. Dave, let's fast forward to 2007. Just imagine Owen with Kevin Owens and Jericho.
Oh.
Holy shit, how hilarious would that be? And oh my God, we can do this all night. We have one more guy we got to talk about. But I have always said, and I said this, I think I've said this to you. I think I said this to you once before. We might have talked about it I think we talked about it when we did our WrestleMania episode. But the Brett Vince feud, not the match, because we know the match at WrestleMania 26 was crap, but that feud missed 3 guys, and 2 of them we talked about tonight. When you're talking about building a feud and having an amazing tete-to-tete storyline situation, I've said this many times, okay? What did that feud miss? That feud missed Bulldog, that feud missed Owen, and that feud missed Pillman. 3 guys whose comedic abilities would have carried that feud between Vince and Brett in 2010.
Yep.
And instead, you were stuck with fucking Bruce and Keith and all these other mumbling doofuses in that family, all the leftovers, instead of the guys that would have really put that feud over like gangbusters. Bulldog and Owen and Pillman. It's a crime. It's a crime. But I just fathom Owen Hart as a trainer in 2012, 2013, 2014 NXT.
Yeah.
Holy
would have
crap.
been amazing.
Oh my God. And again, not just the in-ring part, not just the work rate part, but the psychology and talking the match and filling the gaps. You know, Owen Hart would have been very helpful for Jeff Hardy, who can't fill the gaps in a match, who's awful when it came to telling stories in a match. He threw his body around and then wiggled for 3 minutes, then did another move and then wiggled for 3 minutes. Like, it's the worst. Owen Hart would have been perfect to help out in the late 2000s when, 2008, 2009, when they had elevated Jeff Hardy. Owen Hart would have been the perfect guy to teach him how to fill the gaps of his matches instead of just putting on an amazing move and then goofing off and screwing around for 3 minutes before the next big moment came along. A guy like Owen Hart would have helped him fill those gaps.
Yep.
And would have helped him tell stories. This is really making me sad. I knew this was going to be the one guy tonight, Dave, although this next guy is going to really make me sad. But this is the guy that would have made me sad, because just imagine the asset that Owen Hart would have been in this company over the last 20 years as I don't know if he'd have been an agent. I think he loved being home too much. But I think in the early 2010s, when his kids got a little older and telling Martha, you know what, I'm kind of getting the itch and they kind of want me to train guys. Why don't we move to Florida? Brett, the whole family had passed, Stu and Helen, they were all gone by then. They had all passed away. Everybody's grown up. Like, honey, let's move to Florida. Let's move it to nice weather. Yeah. They want me to train. And remember, Martha was nobody to hate. The whole tone would have been different. We kind of alluded to this in our second episode when we talked about how Montreal never happened. And he goes to Full Sail and he's working with Sami Zayn and he's working with Kevin Owens and he's working with Bobby Roode, all these Canadian guys. And he's oh my God, I can't even. It's ridiculous. And again, it's not just the in-ring. I know we got to move on to the last guy, but it's just not the in-ring, Dave. I want everyone to. It's learning to tell the story.
Yeah,
there weren't many guys that were that good in that era in the 90s that knew how to tell a story in the ring like Owen did. Sometimes even better than Brett. Depending on the match and the opponent. That might open up some. That might open up a can of worms. But in any event. All right. As much as I could talk about Owen forever, we got one more guy to get into, and this guy deserves just as much respect and attention as the previous four did.
And I think I'm going to preface. I think what we've just said about what's happened, what we could have seen happening with Owen post career, I think you could say the exact same stuff about this guy. So we probably don't need to touch on that side of it with our last guy, but you could probably have the exact same conversations with our last guy. And that is, I'm sure everyone knows who's coming. That is the Hall of Famer, Latino Heat, Eddie Guerrero.
Yep.
Man who, another one. This was the one that really impacted a lot of fans. And I think, it had I think it had a deeper hit than what happened with Owen. Owens was a tragedy. But I think the impact of the Bret Hart relationship with Vince and what we talked about before about what ended up happening, I think that really put it made it very difficult with what happened with Owen for a lot of people, because it became hard to talk about him because no one would talk about him because of what happened. Whereas Eddie, you've had storylines built out of Eddie. You've had ongoing references to Eddie. Eddie has become folklore in the WWE, and he had a massive impact. Even his death has had a massive impact on fans and on the in-ring product. So so we come to Eddie Guerrero, who passed away in December. We've been talking about Owen for so long. I'm having a mental blank on the year. December
It was November. It was November of 2005.
05.
November 2005. Yep.
And again, similar to what we've shared with a couple of these other guys, like Magnum TA, like Owen Hart, the story that was out there even before he passed away was that Eddie was scheduled to regain the SmackDown title from Batista the week he passed away. And it's another one of those accepted events was going to happen. No one has ever come out to dispute it. No one has ever come online and said, no, that wasn't the case. The general belief and understanding was Eddie Guerrero was going to regain the world title from Batista. He was in the middle of a very interesting storyline. He had the Rey Mysterio storyline earlier in the year with Dominic and who's his father. And then he starts the pseudo baby. He sort of turned babyface again, but I think the underlying story we're all supposed to look at was he really the babyface? And he was working with Batista and they were teaming together, but then they were going to have this match. And was Eddie going to cheat to win? What was going to happen there? But the general belief is that he was going to beat Batista. And I think I would have liked to think that they probably would have really pushed forward the cheat to win gimmick again in this. And I'd like to think that they've been turning him babyface. They sort of turned him back babyface. I'd like to hope that they were going to keep him there. I really do, because I think where it goes for him is he wins that title from Batista and probably holds it through to WrestleMania, where he probably would have dropped it to Randy Orton. That SmackDown title looked like it was always going to head in Randy Orton's direction, I think. And I can see Eddie winning the belt and holding it through to WrestleMania and having a WrestleMania moment with Randy Orton. That's where I certainly see the early stages of this storyline going. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, I agree. I think the storyline would have continued with Batista. I think that he was destined to win the title sometime down the line. I know he was in the Survivor Series tournament. I'm curious. Well, obviously, Rey Mysterio would not have won the Rumble. That's an interesting one. Who would have won the 2006 Rumble?
Oh, I think they would have put it on Orton.
Probably.
I think Orton. So I think, and I guess we've got to look in here is the fact that where they would have been going with Eddie and Batista would have been impacted by Batista's injury in early January. Batista suffered that injury in early January. I think you probably would have had Eddie win it on SmackDown, and then they have their rematch at the Royal Rumble. And Eddie probably keeps the title through some form of nefarious, cheat to win means that everyone loved seeing, and Orton wins the Royal Rumble. And that's where I think they were heading.
Yeah, you're probably right on that. Yeah. I got an interesting... And I think this would have been hilarious. I don't know when it would have happened, Dave, over the coming... Let's say Eddie wrestles till he wasn't that old. Let's say he wrestles till 2010, 2011, probably. You know who would have been a great WrestleMania opponent for him somewhere in that run? I don't know where or when, because I think the storyline would have been amazing. The Raw and SmackDown segments would have been great. You know who would have been a great opponent for him at a WrestleMania? Undertaker. I think Eddie would have been hilarious and serious at the same time, pumping up Breaking the Streak.
Yes.
I would have loved to have seen that. Now, I don't know where you could have slipped it in. Maybe you don't need Shawn 2 years in a row. Maybe you don't need Triple H 2 years in a row.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because one of the things I would see about Eddie is I think Eddie's career if he hadn't passed away, I think Eddie's career would have ended up being very similar to Edge's. Eddie would move to the top of the card when you need him. He would put on great matches. He would have runs with the title.
Yes.
Then he'd drop it down the card brief, like not all the way down, but he'd just drop down a rung and he'd feud with some guys. He could be heel, he can be babyface. Then he comes back up, and he does it. And I really see him having a very similar. In fact, the person I think if Eddie hadn't passed away, I would even throw out the argument that maybe Edge doesn't have the career he has. I think Edge is the biggest beneficiary of Eddie passing, because Eddie's ability to work face and heel and his ability to work anyone in the ring would have meant that he was someone they could always rely on to elevate people, to have those title runs, those 1-2 month title reigns, to transition to different guys. He becomes that guy. And that's where, like you said, you then get a run with Taker at Mania and doing everything he can to break. I mean, you picture it in the match, doing everything possible to break I'm picturing all the cheat to win stuff, picking up the steel chair, banging it on the ground, throwing it at Taker, falling down, but the referee not falling for it.
Right.
Turning around at the last minute.
Like Eddie could say things like, listen, I don't have to pin you to break your streak. Just remember that. I'll find a way. Remember, I lie, I cheat, I steal. Just let you know that. Even if it's a DQ, you still lose. That you get that in Taker's head. And I agree with you on the Edge thing. Oh my God, Dave, that's awesome. Well, think about it. What's 90% of Edge's storyline for most of his main event career? He's with Vicky. Well, with Eddie around, why the fuck would you do that? That's not going to happen. So
with
yeah,
Eddie around,
Edge,
would we have ever seen Vicky?
Yeah. Because when Eddie died, when Eddie passed away, Chavo was in that stupid Kerwin White gimmick. Holy crap, you're right.
But Vicky was really only ever brought in because of Eddie passing away, and Vince. It was the support. It's let's bring Vicky in to just It was to help her. It was to help her because of what happened to Eddie. If Eddie doesn't pass away, I think we see Vicky on occasion. I think we see her like Shawn Michaels' wife or Michelle McCool. You see her every now and then as part of the underlying storyline of which. She's supporting Eddie in his series, or she's trying to talk him out of doing something nefarious, but she's never going to be in a prominent position. She would probably never be a major on-screen person if Eddie hadn't passed away.
Right. Probably not.
But if she was, the fun they could have had.
Yeah. Yep. And I love your point of in one case, Eddie's a main eventer. He's world heavyweight champion on SmackDown. He's feuding with Batista. He's feuding with this guy, feuding with that guy. And then he gets knocked down the card a bit, wrestles somebody else for a while, and then, could win King of the Ring. Well, there was no King of the Ring, or, win the Rumble or something. I think Eddie would have won a Rumble at some point.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And he probably would have cheated to win.
Of course. He would have pulled a Stone Cold in 97, only funnier.
Yeah. Oh, my favorite, the storyline I would love to have seen one day would be, I've got Rumble. I think I've shared a Rumble storyline before about, I did it with Ric Flair when we did our Ric Flair episode.
Right.
But I can picture Eddie getting number 30, stealing number 30.
Yep.
Actually getting away with it this time. Walking down to ringside, picking up a chair and sitting at ringside, refusing to get in the ring until the last two guys are just about out of the ring, and he slides in and tips them over.
That would have been amazing. That would have been amazing. Yeah, I agree with you on that. And you're definitely right. I think another guy that would have thrived teaching in NXT differently than Owen, but similar in the sense that he was another guy that would have taught timing, whether it's in a promo or in a match, or it's all about another guy who just knew how to tell a story as a cruiserweight, as a smaller guy, as a main event guy, how to be funny but still be a dick, like how to just, just everything he could teach people, teach guys about being a funny baby face and just a ruthless, callous heel and not be funny, even though you want to you want to laugh. Again, all of those things that made him great, and he would have gone in the Hall of Fame, and he did in 2006 after he died. He probably would he have gone in 2006? No, probably not. Obviously, he was still wrestling. He might have gone in maybe sometime in the last 4 or 5 years, if he went in at all at this point. If he was still alive now, he probably wouldn't be in yet.
If he was still alive now, I put it out there. You bring everything full circle. We've had a recent heel turn by Dominic against Ray. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if Dominic turned heel on Ray by turning to him and saying, "This is my real father," and there's paperwork to prove it. He won it in a ladder match.
Yeah,
just bring that whole storyline full circle.
He starts wearing a shirt that says "He is my poppy." Oh my god, that would have been awesome. Oh god, that would have been great. Oh my god, forget the Judgment Day crap. Just Eddie comes back, and you could see Eddie would have I could see Eddie having silvery white hair and a silvery beard and look even more scummy. It's just
Or how about Eddie in the role that Sami Zayn's currently playing? I'm a part of the family. I'm a part of the bloodline.
I'm a part of the bloodline. He's hanging out with Roman, going, "Listen, I can help you, Poppy."
Yeah.
Oh my God. Oh Jesus, that would have been amazing. I have to say, on a side note, I remember crying. Not when Owen died, because when Owen died, the night he died was obviously during that pay-per-view, and we were all just stunned. All of us, we were watching it live. I cried the night after on Raw when they were doing, and everybody was crying when they were all doing their testimonials.
Yeah.
The moment I found out that Eddie died, I was actually at Dr. G's house, and we were cleaning something in his basement, and actually Justin Jr. called the house. And told and called and he said he had found and that instant I cried. And that's the last time that I shouldn't say that. I think I cried the day Dusty died. Was he the last one? That Trinity from the early 2010s. Savage, Piper, and Dusty. I think I cried all 3 of those days. And I'll be honest with you, Dave, because it may happen in the next few years. I'll definitely cry if Flair dies. I definitely will.
Yeah.
But the day Eddie died, I cried. When Owen died, it was during the pay-per-view, and I was just stunned. I didn't cry till the next night watching that Raw. But that Sunday afternoon when Dr. G and I found out that Eddie had died, I cried right in that moment. So, but we don't want to end the show on a sad note, but just everyone think about Eddie in the last 15 years, what he would have done. He would have been an amazing.
I think that's what we've just been able to do at the end here. I think we've been able to see that Eddie would have brought enjoyment and would have brought fun and would have made us laugh right through.
Yep.
And I think that's a great way to round off this episode, is to think about the joy of Eddie Guerrero in the bloodline, or Eddie Guerrero as Dominic's father. It just brings a smile to your face, because you just know he would have made it so good and so enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can smile right now and look at it fondly to this point. So, well, this was a lot of fun. Being able to go through the looking glass and think about what if for some of our favorites of all time, whose careers were either cut short by injury or obviously sadly cut short by life, or the end of it. Dave, this was a lot of fun. We hope that everyone enjoyed it. We hope that everyone, thought themselves what they think. And again, please leave us comments on Twitter, at PTBN Wrestling. Go to the Place to Be page, and when this obviously and go under the episode drop and give us your thoughts. Do you think these wrestlers would have had a different turn of their careers? What any other guys you'd like to think about? Again, Davey Boy Smith, British Bulldog. We could have brought up guys. I mean, there's plenty of other guys we could have talked about. We could have talked about Test. Although Test was kind of at the back end of his career anyway.
Draws.
Brian. Well, Draws is still alive.
Yes, but the injury ended his
the injury.
career.
I'm sorry. Yeah. What would have happened to Draws? Because they were in that weird storyline with the Road Warriors and such. Would Albert have had a different turn of his career? I think it would have been very interesting. Brian Adams, the guys like that, they were at the back end of their careers anyway.
Umaga.
How about Yokozuna?
Yep.
Had he gotten it in his head that you have to cap your weight at like 550 pounds and not 850 pounds, that's one maybe we could do a part 2 down the line, Dave, and come up with 5 different guys. Maybe we could talk about a Yokozuna and maybe had he kind of understood that, I have to do something with my physiology, But anyway, Dave, where can everyone find you?
Hit me up on Facebook, guys. You'll find me, Dave Hall, on Facebook. If you're trying to work out which Dave Hall it is, just go into the PTB Facebook pages and you'll see me linked in different sections there, and hit me up. Send me messages, send me friend requests, and love to chat and interact with you and interact on the pages. I am considering joining Twitter, but I'm not there yet. So
as a podcast CEO, I have no choice. But I get your point. But again, I am on Twitter at Scott C. Podfather. But more importantly, I mean, I do things on my Twitter, but most importantly, please follow the brand on Twitter at PTBN Wrestling. We have a lot of fun. We do polls. We post the shows. We want your comments on any of our shows, whether it's this show, Place to Be Podcast, NWA Crock and Roll, Highway to the Impact Zone. This past week, we had a great episode of PTB NXT, Extreme Resurrection, any of our shows, the new show, the Memphis Continental Wrestling Podcast, any of our shows. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And again, it's particularly to our show, we'd love for you to give us any ideas that you think would make a great topic here through the Looking Glass. We are now 12 episodes in. So next month, our October episode will be our 1-year anniversary. And Dave doesn't know it yet, but we're going to go through the Looking Glass at all of the wrestling marriages. No, I'm just kidding. Would Kane have chokeslammed the priest? No, we're not going to do that. No. But we'll have a great topic because Dave's great at finding them, and I'm okay sometimes, but Dave's better at it. We're going to have a great topic for the month of October to mark our 1-year anniversary of the show. So have a great month, everybody. Enjoy football. Enjoy the pennant races if you're a sports fan. Enjoy the weather changing, either changing to fall or changing to spring, depending where you live. Dave, you're always the best. Have a great one, everybody, and we'll talk to you again through the Looking Glass.
Can you feel the heat? Say hello to Eddie. I don't care if you don't like me. Fight me. Do you feel it? Hey, heat on heat. Yo. I can't be weak. Coming from the streets of the ghetto at the end of the week, I get get to keep your dinero. You're fast asleep when I sneak in your casa. Your life sucks cause you're bankrupt and I'm laughing. You can't trust me, answer, cause I'm Latin. Yeah. Yo, too many try to tell me what I already know. No. Yeah. Viva la raza. You wanna be Latino? If you're not cheating, you're not trying. Mamacita, I got that passion that's lasting long. Los mujeres fall in love with that Latin charm. One woman isn't enough, amigo. Siempre cogiendo más mujeres porque soy Latino. And I'm tougher than tough, calling your bluff, cuz I don't care if you don't like me. Everybody wants to fight me. Hey, oye lo claro, I ain't the one you wanna meet. Hay nada más caliente, I'm too hot for you. Latino heat. The ghetto at the end of the week, I get to keep your dinero. You're fast asleep when I sneak in your casa. Your life sucks cause you're bankrupt and I'm laughing. You can't trust me, answer, cause I'm Latin. Yeah. Yo, too many try to tell me what I already know. No. Yeah. Viva la raza. Wanna be Latino? If you're not cheating, you're not trying. Mamacita, I got that passion that's lasting long. Los mujeres fall in love with that Latin charm. One woman isn't enough, amigo. Siempre cogiendo más mujeres porque soy Latino. And I'm tougher than tough, calling your bluff, cuz